Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow.
Hello, welcome to The Humanist Perspective, brought to you by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association. My name is Beth Deitch, and I'll be your host for this evening. I'm the membership coordinator for NOSHA, and I sit on the board of directors. You can go to nosha.org for more information about us and about humanism. And I'd like to introduce my guest for today is Colin Wade, who is lead organizer of MeToo NOLA. So welcome, Colin.
Hi, thank you.
So tell us about MeToo NOLA and what the organization does.
Okay, MeToo NOLA so far, I mean, it's a kind of a brand new organization. We've so far held speak-outs for survivors of sexual assault and sexual harassment to share basically their Me Too stories in a public setting, kind of like an open mic style. They've been so far at 12 Mile Limit in Mid-City. The owner of that bar is very supportive and great guy. Everyone should go there. And basically what we do is we just let survivors get up and talk and tell their stories. And we find that, I mean, this has a lot of purposes behind it, but one of it is like we want to end or chip away at the taboo of talking about sexual violence.
And feeling like you should be ashamed,
right.
So a sense of shame that someone else harmed you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it helps, I think, because we enable survivors to speak in a supportive setting outside of the legal context. It might be the only time that they ever get to tell their story where they're not being cross-examined or like interrogated. And so I think that can be very empowering and validating for survivors. And healing in a lot of ways. We've had a lot of survivors say that it's given them a lot of healing.
So who are the audience then? Who are they telling it to?
So the audience so far is just people who tend to show up to the event. So it's people who are kind of supporters of or just people who happen to be in the bar when the event happens, which is has actually worked out really well. We've ended up having like random people in the bar that just got up and spoke that had no idea that they were there for the event. But ideally, the audience is everyone. Ideally, we're trying to get this message out and get people to hear the individual stories of trauma, suffering, and healing and empowerment that these women and men, like we have women and men, all genders, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, well, how many of the speak outs have you had?
So we've had 3. We started, our first one was in November, so kind of right after the Harvey Weinstein story broke. And everyone was sharing their Me Too statuses on Facebook, and I was just like thinking, wouldn't this be so much more effective if we saw the people telling their stories? Wouldn't it, if men, at the time, men were reportedly shocked at how many stories were being put out
And
there.
shocked at how unsurprised all the women in their lives were.
Right, right. And so if men are surprised by that, I think they would be very surprised by finding just like a local show of 12 or so survivors that get up and talk about the different ways that they've been harassed or assaulted.
Do you ever get any negative reactions especially from people who maybe didn't know that there was such an event going on?
No, actually, we've had really good, so far, people, they might leave if they're up for their birthday or something. Because
maybe kind of not the vibe you want for your birthday party.
But generally, Cole, the owner of 12 Mile Limit, has been really great and said he would just kick out anyone who, if there were any hecklers or anything like that. So. Another reason we really like Cole.
Right. So you just came up with this idea out of the blue? There's not other speak out groups that you were modeling after? Or?
No, it kind of came out of a random I'd wanted to get involved in this kind of work for a while, but one day, one of the days that this blew up and everyone was posting, my roommate, Nicole, texted me and was talking about how someone was really aggressive with her on her MeToo, her MeToo post, and being tell us more, and just and it really put her off.
Right.
And somehow from that conversation that we had, I ended up being well, let's have speak outs and make it even more. And we don't allow Q&A at the end or anything.
Right. And I think that's one of the things on Facebook is that when you post something on Facebook, then there's that whole comment thread.
Right.
Where people may be supportive, but you may get some sort of pushback or blame or who knows, and it's not necessarily going to be a safe place to tell your story.
Right. And then fortunately, if there are people who have had those kinds of reactions or bad reactions in our speak out so far, they have had the good sense to keep it to themselves.
Well, and I think you can control it better in person. Like you say, you can kick out somebody, whereas once you've read the horrible comments on your Facebook wall, they're sort of in you there. You can't unsee them. And there definitely are horrible people on the internet. You said you'd been wanting to get involved in something like this for a while. Why is that? What motivated you to get this started?
I have a lot of personal reasons, but just like every woman, I've had my share of sexual assault and sexual harassment. I guess I could get on. I've made a timeline of it, and it's very prevalent in my life. And when I talk about it with other women, or in men for that matter, I keep getting I've been very vocal about it, and I keep getting oh, me too, but nobody knows, or I don't tell my husband, or I've only told my therapist, or I've never really talked about it, and so I feel like there's a lot of unprocessed trauma out there, and I think at least I'm not a mental health professional, but it seems like a starting point to processing that trauma is speaking about it and acknowledging it and having other people also acknowledge it. Another kind of unintended effect of this whole, or unforeseen, maybe not unintended, of this whole thing is that it started to create this community of survivors. After the speak outs are over, usually the different survivors who have spoken talk to each other and exchange information and are very supportive of each other, and I
could see where the experience might kind of help form a bond. You sort of shared something that maybe you haven't felt able to share before.
And from what I've been told by many of my survivors that have spoken to me about it, is that one of the ways that sexual assault can be so traumatizing is the way that, I think the term is second rape, the way the community response doesn't actually help survivors and kind of reinforces, all the negative impacts. And when I was speaking with a survivor just the other day who was telling me that she had felt really failed by her community, and she was speaking specifically about Black women, because she's a young Black woman, but she had found like strength through these other survivors, and like so it brought together these women from diverse kind of backgrounds that might not otherwise have been connected,
Right.
and allowed them to support each other.
That's great. Can you sort of explain a little more what you mean by the second rape and not supported by your community? In what ways are women not supported?
In what ways? Let me count
makes it
them.
feel like a second rape.
Okay, so if we want to talk about like on the official societal level, like just from the way that, like, for example, our DA has been known and criticized for his handling of sexual assault cases. I won't get too much into that, but
so you mean treatment by the legal system?
Treatment by the legal system. Often people are talking to doctors, talking to therapists, talking to first responders or medical professionals that don't believe them.
Oh, jeez.
And
these are the people who are supposed to be collecting the evidence.
And these are the people who are supposed to be collecting the evidence.
Yeah.
A survivor is going to get a sense that you don't believe them if that's happening. But then the other factor is, like, Louisiana currently provides $0 in funding to anything having to do with violence against women. Wow. So currently, like, rape crisis services are like heavily dependent on the Violence Against Women Act and grants, which, if you have heard President Trump speak about that.
I had a hard time saying that.
I did,
sorry. We all do.
But I lost my train of thought again.
Violence Against Women Act. Not going to be funded as well.
Right, not going to be funded as well. And so Louisiana already devalues and doesn't fund, and of course we're facing a fiscal crisis as it is. So I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So,
but if people wanted to donate, to try and help make up for some of that money that's being taken away federally.
Yeah, so there's a lot of there's a lot of great organizations. One of the organizations that works here in Orleans Parish and four other parishes is STAR. It's Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response, and they definitely need donations. They provide advocacy and mental health and legal advice for survivors and secondary survivors. I guess I'll go ahead and plug us too.
Yes,
We're also accepting donations. We have a GoFundMe because it does cost to put on these speak outs, just because of like the outreach mainly, getting people to know about it and
that's
advertising.
At MeTooNOLA.com, is it?
It's actually, there's a GoFundMe link. It's GoFundMe at MeToo-NOLA.com. But you can find that on
if you wanted to find out about the speak outs and sign up and all, would be at MeToo NOLA.
Yeah. And then most of the action's on the Facebook page right now, though.
Yeah. Okay.
But going back to the second rape thing, I got off track. So there are the ways that these services do exist or don't exist, and then there's the effectiveness of those services once they are in place. But then there's also just the interpersonal, like, everyday life of the survivor who has to deal with their family's reaction, their friends' reactions, their coworkers' reactions. I can't say that. I don't know statistics, but a lot of survivors are diagnosed with PTSD, and that particular condition manifests itself in a number of ways that can make holding down a regular job difficult, can make being reliable and all this sort of thing difficult. And I think our society doesn't always have a lot of understanding and space for that.
Well, and mental health
in general,
would also
yes.
be, of course, something that you would
Right.
wish were funded.
Right, and then
because it's certainly something that women need after
Right.
something traumatic like that. Now, are you really mostly focusing on more severe sexual assaults with the speak outs, or are you also trying to get at some of the everyday harassment kind of issues?
It's actually anything you want to speak about. So we've had people get up and speak about like kind of microaggressions, which I think are just as important to speak about as rape and other assaults. But we encourage everything. I think it does tend towards being the more serious discussions, but we really encourage everything, because I think one of the things that's important about this is you may be sitting in the audience and you may be a supporter, but you may not have ever recognized, oh, that particular form of microaggression. Oh, that happened to me in some way or shape or form, and I didn't feel great about it, and kind of helps you bring attention to.
I mean, it happens less than when I was younger, but I'd still say it's at least once a month that some random man on the street tells me to alter my facial expression or posture or something to please him. Just a couple weeks ago, and I'm walking along, kind of just lost in my thoughts. I'm watching where I'm walking, and he goes, "Pick your head up."
Yeah,
and there's always you're pretty. You should have your head up. Pick your. Like, who are you to tell me I'm supposed to stand or walk? And it's just, and that's so common. All these little.
So common.
Just being messed with all the time.
It's constant. It's constant, and I think it's just as important to talk about, because that's the slippery slope that leads to men thinking that they have a right to women's bodies or other things like that. But
do you sometimes find that people? It's something that I found frustrating, is that people who will say they are allies. And then they say, well, the Harvey Weinsteins, whichever, they need to be put away. And it's like, but, all this other stuff is going too far. That it's just like they seem to think that it only encompasses, we'll finally do something to out-and-out rapists. Right. But what would you say if you were to define the Me Too movement, like what it encompasses?
For everyone, I don't know if I can. I can speak
what
for.
Would you say?
Okay. For me, it's about exposing and bringing to light claims by sexual assault and sexual harassment survivors and believing them and making them less taboo. I'm a lawyer, so I have I understand the innocent until proven guilty kind of thing, but at the same time, I think that we have had millennia of treating women like they weren't telling the truth, or were asking for it, or whatever horrible thing you want to say. And so I feel like if the scale's tipped a little off right now, that's not so bad. And I mean, frankly, Matt Lauer loses his TV show, boo-hoo.
Well, and there's that's this innocent until proven guilty is a criminal standard,
right? And that's private.
And I mean, we've had some high-profile people kind of bounced out of the secular, humanist, atheist community recently, and it's like, okay, innocent until proven guilty is a great standard for locking you up, for taking away your liberty.
Sure.
But what should the standard be for we don't give you plum speaking? Positions
more
at our
probable
conventions,
than not.
And people are acting like it still should be this beyond any possible doubt before you unfriend them on Facebook, even, or before you decide they're not going to be the headliner at your convention. And I'm really, people get so hung up on this criminal standard.
Right, and I think that's one of the things that makes sexual violence and harassment so insidious, is because we all know someone who has been a harasser or an abuser, and we all know someone who has been abused or harassed. So at some point in our lives, we're all put in the position of either defending one or defending the other. But I think a lot of people tend to forget that, yes, for a criminal matter, yes, we have to innocent until proven guilty, all of that sort of thing. But for just like a private company to decide that they don't want you to be their CEO anymore, that's their choice. That's how employment works.
Right. Right. And the like civil standard of more likely than not.
Right.
Because I don't see what women have to gain by false accusations. This idea that there are women making false accusations all over the place when it is clear that it is horrible for the woman who makes accusations.
Yeah, I don't believe in false accusations unless the person doing
like somebody somewhere.
Yeah, maybe. But like, I mean, when you make an accusation of rape, I mean, it's probably fairly well known, but you have to preserve all the evidence, go to the hospital, and go through a rape kit, which, if you're not familiar with the details of that, is very traumatizing, very invasive. They have to see your whole body. They have to take pictures of everything, and it takes hours. And that's just
when you just want to curl up in a ball and cry.
Yeah, and that's just the first step. And you can't shower before that. So, there's that. And then when you go to report, you're thinking the whole time, in the back of your head, well, what are they going to say about me? Because you know all the famous case, you know what's happened in the highly famous rape cases. Like, they just drag the victims through the mud as much as possible. So I think you'd have to be very stupid or very crazy to make a false accusation of rape. It's just not worth it.
Right. So why do you think people want to suggest that those things are common?
I think it's because it's easier to believe that it's not as prevalent as it is.
I think humanity is better than it is.
Yeah, I think, and I think there's also a certain, I guess, subset of rapes, harassments, abuses that the abuser, harasser, rapist has like rationalized and actually doesn't believe that they've done anything wrong. And so I think that that has a lot to do with why people, just more people don't want to, because we think of rapists like being, someone in a dark alley with a gun.
Right.
You don't think of it as being just someone who just overpowers you or
your volleyball coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And that's more commonly what it is. And I think it's a really scary world to acknowledge that it's happening as much as it does happen. It's it's taboo to talk about, so people don't like to talk about it.
Right.
And I think it's just
there also seems to be this thing that that men's agency to go about their lives and do whatever they're doing is so much more important than the women. So that,
obviously.
Things like I had mentioned before this, the article that I found on your MeToo Facebook page about the judge in California with the Brock Turner case. And it was at the New York Times that he's really upset at how unfair it is to him that people have initiated a recall campaign and that he has been reduced to a Twitter stereotype, and he gets teary-eyed at how unfair it is. And everyone was, because his sentence against Brock Turner was so lenient, and everyone was really concerned about Brock Turner and his athletic career, and it's like the judge's judicial career. The swimmer, what do you swimmer?
I think he was a swimmer,
his athletic career, so important that that it's like, well, a woman's sanity and sort of integrity and bodily, is not. We really don't want to. It's not enough for some people, I guess, to think that they could take away men's, comfort, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unbelievable how, I mean, Louisiana until not too long ago used to execute child rapists. So in some ways we take rape as like the most serious of crimes, but then in
children.
Against children.
Yeah.
But at some point I think it was also, you could be executed for just rape.
I'm curious
you'd have
if that
to fact
ever
check
happened
me
to a
on
white
that.
man.
That's a good question. But I think on the one hand, our society is saying, okay, well, this is right up there. This is one of the worst crimes that you can have. And then on the other hand, we're saying it's not that bad. Women don't really have like rights to their bodies. Like, I mean, like just the little bit of like the person who puts his hand around your shoulder when it's inappropriate. That's the same. It's like a step towards that same attitude.
Right.
And I think a lot of men don't want to acknowledge that they feel that way. And I hate to harp on men here because it's not, I think 1 in 9 men will be sexually assaulted in their lifetimes. So it's not just men, it just happens that it's 1 in 4, 1 in 3 women.
Right. Well, and part of what makes some of those things more threatening is that men are on average larger than women. And so, when someone is touching you without your consent, your sense of whether that's a safety threat is going to be very different depending on whether it's someone who can easily physically overcome you or not.
Right.
And so I think that's one reason why men sort of doing those things to women is more of a problem than the other way around. So do you get involved in other things like political issues? I know we had recently we failed to pass and we're almost out of time, but that we failed to pass a bill that would have prohibited employers from requiring women to undergo arbitration with their harassers or abusers.
Yes.
And so things like that, who can we yell at?
Well, you can start by yelling at your local legislators, your representatives. MeToo is like getting into the advocacy portion of that. Like, frankly, the organization is kind of small, so we can't really do too much. But we did participate. There was this great day for, it was called, I always get it backwards. Advocacy Day for Louisiana women.
I did that show with those organizers a couple shows ago.
And that was a really great day to like go and get involved.
So, and people can, I imagine, keep up with that on your Facebook page?
Oh, absolutely.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so our time is up for today. Thank you very much, Colin.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us out there. And I hope you'll join us again for the Humanist Perspective next time.